I am Pamela Anderson, 32 years old, and music has always been the heartbeat of my life. Growing up in Boston, my grandmother's antique Steinway piano became my sanctuary, my inheritance, my connection to our family's musical legacy. When my phone buzzed with a text from my brother Travis last spring, I never imagined reading those words, "Sold your piano. We need the money." In one moment, my world crumbled. What Travis never bothered to learn was the true value of what he had so carelessly discarded. Before I dive into how my brother betrayed me for just $500, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you have ever had a family member who took something precious from you. Trust me, what happened next in this story will show you exactly why sometimes silence is the most powerful weapon you can wield. The piano had been in our family for 4 generations. My grandmother Eleanor was the one who truly made it legendary in our family. Growing up in the suburbs of Boston, in a modest 2-story home, some of my earliest memories were of sitting beside her on the worn bench, watching her fingers dance across the keys with a grace that seemed almost magical to my 5-year-old eyes. "This piano has stories to tell, Pamela," she would say, her voice gentle but filled with pride. "It has survived wars, depressions, and family dramas long before you were born." Grandmother Eleanor had been a concert pianist in the 1950s, performing in venues across New England. She never achieved international fame, but in Boston's classical music circles, the name Eleanor Anderson carried weight. The Steinway grand piano, manufactured sometime in the 1880s, according to the faded date inside, had been passed to her from her own mother, who received it from a great-aunt who had married into money. "Your great-great-aunt Julia bought this from a European family who had fallen on hard times after the First World War," grandmother would tell me. "They say it once belonged to nobility, though we never found the papers to prove it." Those stories fascinated me as a child. I would run my small fingers along the ornate carvings on the legs, imagining aristocrats in fine clothing gathered around it at elegant parties. The deep mahogany finish had aged to a rich patina that glowed amber in the sunlight from our living room window. It wasn't just beautiful, it had a voice that resonated like no other piano I had ever played before or since. My own relationship with the piano began when I was just 5 years old. While other children in the neighborhood were riding bikes or playing with dolls, I was perched on that bench, my feet dangling well above the floor, learning scales and simple melodies. Grandmother was my first teacher, patient but firm, instilling in me not just technique but a deep respect for the instrument itself. "A piano like this deserves to be played by someone who understands its soul," she would say. "I see that understanding in you, Pamela." By the time I was 12, I was performing in recitals, my talent obvious enough that my parents scraped together money for proper lessons with Mrs. Abernathy, a retired Juilliard instructor who lived nearby. Those lessons weren't cheap, and they created the first ripples of tension in our financially stretched household. My brother Travis, 3 years older than me, never understood my dedication to music. While I practiced Chopin and Beethoven for hours after school, he was out playing football or working on cars with his friends. We lived in different worlds, even within the same house. "Mom and Dad are spending a fortune on your piano lessons while I need new cleats for football," he complained once when we were teenagers. "That old wood box is eating up all the money in this family." Old wood box. That was how he always referred to the Steinway, never understanding its significance, its history, or its value, monetary or otherwise. Our parents, Jack and Marie Anderson, tried their best to support both our interests equally, but it was clear that my musical pursuits were more expensive. Dad worked as an engineer at a manufacturing plant, while Mom taught 2nd grade at the local elementary school. They weren't poor, but there was always a careful balancing of the budget, especially when it came to extras like my competitions or Travis's sports equipment. Despite these occasional tensions, our childhood was largely happy. Every Sunday evening, we would have family dinner followed by what Dad called mandatory culture hour, which usually meant me playing the piano while the family listened. Even Travis would sit quietly, though his attention was usually on a sports magazine hidden in his lap. Everything changed when grandmother Eleanor passed away when I was 23. In her will, she specifically left the Steinway to me, along with her collection of sheet music and a small sum that barely covered a year of graduate studies at the New England Conservatory, where I was pursuing my master's degree in piano performance. "This piano belongs to someone who will give it voice," her will stated. "To my granddaughter Pamela, who has the hands and heart to keep its music alive." Travis received grandmother's car, and some investments worth roughly the same as the piano, or so we thought at the time, valuing the Steinway at perhaps $15,000, at most based on a casual appraisal years earlier. Just 2 years later, tragedy struck again, when our parents died in a car accident on an icy January night. At 25, I found myself an orphan with only Travis, then 28, as my remaining immediate family. We inherited our parents' modest house and savings, which after funeral expenses and settling their affairs, left us with the house and about $60,000 to split. Travis had been working in construction, but had recently started his own small contracting business that was struggling to get off the ground. I had completed my master's degree and was piecing together a living through performances, competition prizes, and teaching piano at a community music school. The strain on our relationship grew as we tried to navigate our grief and our new financial reality. Travis wanted to sell the family home immediately and split the proceeds. I wanted to hold on to it at least for a while as it contained so many memories. And my grandmother's piano, which had been moved there temporarily, while my small apartment was undergoing renovations to fix a water leak. "We could both use the cash," he argued. "You can buy a new piano that doesn't cost a fortune to maintain." But I had promised grandmother I would keep the piano. It wasn't about the money. It was about the legacy, the connection to our family history, and yes, the exceptional quality of the instrument itself. Any pianist knows that no two pianos, even of the same make and model, sound exactly alike. This one had a warmth and depth that seemed to respond to my touch in a way that felt like a conversation rather than a performance. What I didn't know then was that Travis had developed a gambling problem during college that had grown worse over the years. His business struggles were partly due to his habit of betting on sports games and poker nights that often left him scrambling to cover his losses. He hid this well from me, making excuses about slow client payments or unexpected business expenses when he came asking for loans. If I had known then what I would discover later, perhaps I could have helped him sooner. Perhaps the Steinway would never have left our family. But some lessons come at a steep price, and this one would cost my brother far more than he ever imagined. By the spring of last year, I had established myself as a respected piano teacher at the Brighton Conservatory, a small but prestigious music school just outside Boston. I wasn't famous, but I had built a reputation as both a performer and educator, specializing in Romantic-era compositions. My students ranged from gifted children to adults returning to music later in life, and I found deep satisfaction in helping others discover their own connection to music. Then came the setback that would indirectly set our family drama in motion. During a particularly demanding rehearsal for an upcoming concert featuring Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, I began experiencing sharp pain in my right wrist. I ignored it at first, pushing through as musicians often do, but after a particularly grueling 6-hour practice session, I could barely move my fingers. The diagnosis was devastating intersection syndrome with tendon inflammation requiring immediate rest, physical therapy, and possibly minor surgery if it didn't improve. Just like that, my performing career was put on hold. 3 upcoming concerts were canceled, including one that would have paid $4,000, money I had already mentally allocated to repair the roof on my small condo. At least 3 months without performing, the specialist told me, her face sympathetic but firm. "And you need to significantly reduce your teaching hours. The hand needs rest, Pamela." The medical bills began piling up almost immediately. My health insurance covered some, but the specialist visits, custom braces, and physical therapy sessions 3 times a week quickly depleted my modest savings. With my income reduced by almost 60%, I found myself in a financial bind for the first time since graduate school. It was during this vulnerable period that Travis began escalating his requests for money. We had maintained a cordial but distant relationship in the years since our parents' death. He would come to my performances occasionally, and we met for dinner on birthdays and holidays, but there was always an undercurrent of tension between us. His construction business had remained perpetually on the verge of breaking through, according to him, though he never seemed to achieve the stability he promised was just around the corner. "Just a short-term loan," he said during one of our rare dinner meetups. "I've got this huge renovation contract, but I need capital for materials up front. I'll pay you back double in 2 months." I had heard variations of this request before, and while I had helped him with smaller amounts in the past, something felt different this time. His eyes darted around the restaurant nervously, and there was a slight tremor in his hands as he gulped his third beer. "Travis, I would if I could, but I'm barely making ends meet with my injury," I explained, showing him the custom brace on my right hand. "I've had to cancel all my performances for the summer season." His face hardened. "What about selling some of Mom's jewelry? Or that fancy piano of yours? It's just sitting there in the family house collecting dust while you're not even living there." The suggestion sent a chill through me. "The piano is not for sale. Ever. You know it was Grandmother's gift to me." "It's just an old piano, Pamela," he scoffed. "You could get a brand new one for what we'd make selling that antique, and we'd both have some breathing room financially." What I didn't know then was how desperate Travis's situation had become. His gambling addiction had escalated from sports betting to high-stakes poker games with dangerous people. His business was not just struggling, it was a shell used primarily to launder his gambling debts and occasional wins. And his marriage to Lauren, a kind woman who had always been friendly to me, was falling apart under the strain of his lies. I learned some of this later from Lauren herself, who called me in tears one evening. "Has Travis asked you for money recently?" she asked, her voice cracking. "He has," I admitted. "For business materials," he said. Her bitter laugh told me everything. "There is no big renovation contract, Pamela. He lost $30,000 to a bookie last month. We're about to lose the house." I was stunned into silence. The Travis I knew had always been somewhat irresponsible with money, but gambling addiction was something I never suspected. It explained so much. His erratic behavior, constant cash flow problems despite seemingly steady work, the increasing desperation in his requests. I offered to help Lauren find resources for both of them, financial counseling, addiction support, but she had reached her breaking point. "I'm staying with my sister for now," she said. "I've tried to help him for 3 years, but he refuses to admit he has a problem. Maybe hitting rock bottom is what he needs." I didn't realize then that my beloved piano would become collateral damage in my brother's downward spiral, or that rock bottom would involve betraying me in a way I couldn't have imagined. The piano had been moved to our parents' old house 6 weeks earlier when my condo needed emergency repairs for water damage. Travis and I still co-owned the family home, though neither of us lived there. We had been renting it out occasionally for short-term leases, but it had been vacant for the past 2 months while we considered whether to sell it or continue as landlords. The last time I had visited to check on the piano was 2 weeks before the fateful text. I had played for almost an hour despite the discomfort in my hand, finding solace in Chopin's nocturnes as sunlight streamed through the living room windows just as it had during my childhood. The piano needed tuning, and one key in the upper register stuck slightly, but its voice was as rich and resonant as ever. "I'll be back for you soon," I remember saying as I closed the lid, never imagining that by the time I returned it would be gone, sold for a fraction of its worth by a brother who saw it as nothing more than old wood and a solution to his self-created problems. The morning of April 15th started like any other Tuesday. I had a physical therapy appointment scheduled for 10 o'clock, followed by lunch with a colleague from the conservatory. My hand had been showing improvement, and the therapist was optimistic that I might be able to start performing again within a month, albeit with a limited repertoire that wouldn't strain my recovering tendons. As I was gathering my things to leave for the appointment, my phone buzzed with a text message. Seeing Travis's name on the screen wasn't unusual. Despite our differences, we still communicated regularly about the family house and other practical matters. What was unusual was the content of his message, which I had to read 3 times before its meaning fully registered. "Sold your piano. We need the money. Property taxes due on house. Your half is $250. We'll drop off check tomorrow." I felt as though I had been plunged into ice water. My fingers trembled as I called him immediately, but the call went straight to voicemail. I tried again, and again. After the 5th attempt, I sent a barrage of texts. What are you talking about? You can't sell my piano. Travis, this isn't funny. Call me right now. That piano was left to me in grandmother's will. You had no right. No response. I canceled my physical therapy appointment and rushed to my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. The 15-minute drive to our parents' house felt like an eternity, my mind racing through possibilities, clinging to the hope that this was some kind of terrible joke or misunderstanding. It wasn't. When I arrived, I noticed an empty space in the living room where the Steinway had stood for decades. The faded rectangle on the hardwood floor was the only evidence it had ever been there. The piano bench remained looking orphaned and purposeless in the corner. As I stood frozen in shock, I heard the front door open behind me. Travis walked in, keys jingling in his hand, his expression a mixture of defiance and discomfort when he saw me. "You had no right," I whispered, my voice barely audible even to my own ears. He shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "We needed to pay the property taxes. They were overdue and they were about to put a lien on the house." "The taxes are only $3,000 for the whole year," I said, my voice gaining strength as anger began to replace shock. "And I paid my half last month. I have the receipt. Where's the piano, Travis?" He walked past me to the kitchen, grabbing a beer from the refrigerator before answering. "Sold it to a guy who deals in antiques. We've been bleeding money on this house, and that piano was just sitting here." "How much?" I demanded, following him. "How much did you sell my piano for?" $500, he said casually, as though discussing the sale of an old couch or coffee table. "It was just old wood, Pam. It needed repairs, and the guy said most old pianos aren't worth much unless they're rare models." I felt physically ill. $500. That piano was worth at least $15,000. Even if it wasn't rare, it was a Steinway, for God's sake. "Well, maybe you should have taken better care of it then," he shot back. "Or kept it at your place instead of leaving it here. This house costs money to maintain, and you're always too busy with your music students to help with the upkeep." The injustice of his words stunned me momentarily. I had always contributed equally to the house expenses, often covering Travis's portion when he claimed to be short on funds. And now he had sold my most precious possession, my inheritance, my livelihood, my connection to our family's past, for less money than I spent on groceries in a month. "Where is it now?" "Who bought it? I want their information," I demanded. "Some dealer. Collins Antiques downtown. But the sale is final, Pam. I already used the money." Something in his expression triggered a realization. The property taxes aren't really due, are they? This isn't about the house at all. His silence confirmed my suspicion. "How much do you owe Travis, and to whom gambling debts again?" His face flushed with anger. "Don't act all superior. You have no idea what I'm dealing with. Some guys are after me for money, and they're not the patient type. I needed cash fast." "So you stole from me, your own sister. You stole something that was legally mine, that you knew meant everything to me." "It's just a piano," he shouted. "You can buy another one when your hand heals. I could be in real danger here." "Danger you created for yourself," I said, my voice growing quiet as a cold realization settled over me. This wasn't just about the piano. It was about years of enabling Travis's behavior, of making excuses for his irresponsibility, of maintaining a relationship that had become increasingly one-sided. I walked to the piano bench and opened it, relieved to find that at least grandmother's sheet music collection was still there. As I gathered the yellowed pages, some dating back to the early 1900s, tears began streaming down my face. "I want the dealer's phone number and address," I said, without looking at him. "And I want you to understand something, Travis. This is the last time you will ever take anything from me. We're done." "Don't be dramatic," he scoffed. "It's just an old piano, not worth ruining our relationship over." I finally looked up at him, seeing not the brother I had grown up with, but a stranger who had become so consumed by his addiction that he could no longer recognize the value of anything, or anyone, in his life. "Our relationship," I repeated. "You ended that the moment you decided my inheritance was yours to sell. The property taxes were an excuse. At least have the decency to admit you sold my piano to pay a gambling debt. His expression hardened, then crumpled. Fine. Yes. I owe some people money. Dangerous people. They were threatening me, Pam. What was I supposed to do? Anything but this, I whispered, gathering the last of the sheet music and heading for the door. I want that dealer's information. Now. He scribbled something on a piece of paper and thrust it at me. Here. But it won't change anything. The sale is final, he said. No returns. I took the paper without another word and walked out, the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest like a physical burden. In my car, I allowed myself 5 minutes of unrestrained tears before wiping my eyes, starting the engine, and driving away from the home where I had once felt safe and loved. What I didn't know then, what Travis certainly didn't know, was that his desperate act would lead to a discovery that would change both our lives forever. The piano he had so carelessly discarded as just old wood was about to reveal its true value, and the consequences would be beyond anything either of us could have imagined. The business card Travis had given me was for Collins Antiques and Collectibles, a shop in downtown Boston. I had passed many times but never entered. By the time I arrived, it was late afternoon, and my emotional exhaustion had hardened into determination. I needed to find my piano to see if there was any way to get it back, regardless of what it might cost me financially. The shop was cluttered with furniture art and various historical items, with classical music playing softly in the background, ironically a Chopin piece I had performed just months earlier. An elderly man with wire-rimmed glasses looked up from behind the counter as I entered. "Can I help you?" he asked pleasantly. "My brother sold you a Steinway piano earlier today," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It wasn't his to sell. It belongs to me and I want it back." The man's expression changed from welcoming to guarded. "Ah, yes. The mahogany grand. I'm afraid I no longer have it. I sold it this morning to a private collector who specializes in vintage musical instruments." My heart sank. Already. But it's only been hours. Mr. Bennett has been looking for a 19th century Steinway for quite some time. When this one came in, I contacted him immediately. He had it transported to his private showroom just 2 hours ago. I felt the last thread of hope slipping away. "Please, this piano has been in my family for generations. It was left to me by my grandmother. My brother had no right to sell it." The dealer's expression softened slightly. "I'm truly sorry to hear that. Family disputes are always difficult." He hesitated, then added, "If it helps, I can give you Mr. Bennett's business card. Though I should warn you, he's quite protective of his collection." I took the card gratefully. Edward Bennett Musical Antiquities and Restoration, along with his phone number and the address of his showroom in Cambridge. Before leaving, I had one more question. The man who brought in the piano, my brother, did he have any paperwork for it? Any documentation of ownership? The dealer looked uncomfortable. He claimed it had been in the family for generations, but was taking up space they no longer had. He said he was handling the estate sale for his parents. A blatant lie. Our parents had been gone for years and the piano had specifically been left to me. This information might help me legally reclaim it, but first I needed to locate it and prevent it from being moved or resold. Instead of calling Mr. Bennett immediately, I decided to arm myself with as much information as possible about the piano's provenance. I drove to my apartment and retrieved a small wooden box containing what little documentation I had, photographs of the piano from various family events over the decades, grandmother's will specifically bequeathing it to me, and a small leather-bound notebook she had kept with details about the instrument. I had never paid much attention to the notebook before, seeing it as just one of grandmother's many sentimental keepsakes. Now I read it carefully, my eyes widening as I turned the yellowed pages. According to her notes, the piano had been purchased by my great-great-aunt Julia from a European family in 1923. What I hadn't known was that this family claimed to be distant relatives of the Austrian nobility forced to sell their possessions after the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire following World War I. Grandmother had written Julia, was told this Steinway was one of 3 commissioned by Archduke Rudolph in 1885 as gifts for notable musicians of the Habsburg court. The craftsmanship is extraordinary, with hand-carved details and a unique serial number pattern not found in standard production models. Whether this provenance is accurate or simply a romantic story attached to sell the instrument at a premium, the piano itself is exceptional in both tone and craftsmanship. This was far more specific information than the vague stories grandmother had told me as a child. If true, it suggested the piano might be more valuable than even I had realized, but I needed expert confirmation. I called Dr. Harriet Winters, a music history professor at the conservatory who specialized in 19th century instruments. Despite the late hour, she agreed to meet me for coffee after I explained the urgency of my situation. "Your grandmother's notes are fascinating," Dr. Winters said after reviewing the leather notebook. "The timeline aligns with historical events, and Archduke Rudolph was indeed a patron of the arts, particularly music. Beethoven dedicated several compositions to him." "But would a piano from that provenance be particularly valuable?" I asked. She removed her glasses thoughtfully. "Potentially extremely valuable, especially if the provenance can be verified. Historical instruments with royal connections and unique craftsmanship can fetch anywhere from hundreds of thousands to millions at auction, depending on condition and documentation." My coffee cup halted midway to my lips. "Millions. You can't be serious." "I am entirely serious. The musical instrument collection at the Metropolitan Museum has several pieces valued in that range. But without examination and authentication, it's impossible to say for certain." Armed with this information, I called Edward Bennett first thing the next morning. To my surprise, he agreed to meet me that afternoon at his showroom. The showroom was actually a converted warehouse in Cambridge, climate-controlled and secured like a museum. Bennett, a tall man in his 60s with a distinguished gray beard, greeted me cordially, but with obvious caution. "Miss Anderson, I understand you have concerns about the provenance of the Steinway I purchased yesterday," he said, as he led me through rooms containing various historical instruments from harpsichords to early 20th century pianos. "It wasn't just concerns about provenance," I replied. "That piano belongs to me. It was left to me by my grandmother and has been in our family for generations. My brother sold it without my knowledge or consent." Bennett frowned. "That's troubling to hear. The dealer assured me the sale was legitimate." "I have my grandmother's will stating it was bequeathed to me," I said, opening my folder of documents. "And I have these family photographs showing it in our home throughout the decades." He examined the papers carefully. "This does appear to support your claim. Family disputes over valuable items are unfortunately common in my business." He hesitated, then added, "The piano is in my restoration room. Would you like to see it?" I nodded, emotion threatening to overwhelm me again. The Steinway sat in the center of a spacious workroom, looking somehow both familiar and foreign under the bright, specialized lighting. A man in a white coat was carefully examining the interior mechanism, making notes on a clipboard. "This is Dr. Faulkner," my authenticator Bennett explained. "He's been conducting a preliminary assessment since the piano arrived yesterday." Faulkner looked up, his expression excited. "Mr. Bennett, the serial number configuration confirms it. This is indeed one of the 3 special commissioned Steinways from 1885. The craftsmanship of the soundboard and the hand-carved details on the case are consistent with the special commission's workshop, not the regular production line." Bennett's eyes widened. "You're certain?" "Without question. The unique rosewood inlay pattern was only used on royal commissions during that 5-year period. And look here," he pointed to a small mark inside the piano that I had never noticed, the Habsburg eagle very faintly stamped. This was almost certainly made for Archduke Rudolph's court. Bennett turned to me, his expression now one of professional excitement rather than suspicion. "Miss Anderson, do you have any idea what you have here? This isn't just an antique piano. This is a historical treasure. My grandmother mentioned something about Austrian nobility, but I always thought it was just a family story," I admitted. "It's no story," Faulkner interjected. "Based on my preliminary assessment, this instrument would be valued at minimum $2.5 million at auction, possibly as high as $4 million, with its provenance and condition." The room seemed to spin around me. "Millions," I echoed faintly. Bennett nodded. I purchased it from Collins for $75,000, which I thought was a remarkable bargain even without confirming the Habsburg connection. Collins clearly had no idea what he had acquired. And Travis had sold it for $500. The magnitude of his mistake, and his betrayal, hit me with renewed force. As I stood there processing this information, Bennett's phone rang. He excused himself to answer it, then returned with an odd expression. "That was Collins," he said. "Apparently your brother left your contact information with him as a backup, saying you might have additional documentation about the piano. Collins just passed your number to me. I was actually planning to call you later today about insurance documentation." He showed me his phone screen displaying a text message from the antique dealer buyer for Steinway looking for insurance documentation. Previous owner's sister may have papers. Her number is... "I was going to ask you about any historical documentation you might have," Bennett continued. "For insurance purposes, I need to declare the full value, which appears to be approximately $3.7 million based on Dr. Faulkner's assessment and comparable sales of historical instruments." $3.7 million. The number seemed unreal, disconnected from the beloved instrument I had played since childhood. An instrument my brother had casually dismissed as just old wood and sold for less than the cost of a decent bicycle. "Mr. Bennett," I said, finally finding my voice, "I need to be very clear. This piano was sold without my consent. I have documentation proving it belongs to me. I understand you purchased it in good faith, but I'm prepared to take legal action to reclaim it if necessary." Rather than becoming defensive, Bennett nodded thoughtfully. I suspected something wasn't right with the sale. The price was far too low, even without knowing its Habsburg connection. He paused. "Miss Anderson, I'm a collector, but I'm also a businessman. I propose we put a hold on any legal proceedings while we discuss options that might satisfy both of us." We agreed to meet again the following day with our respective lawyers. As I left, Bennett added one last comment that would prove fateful. "I'll need to notify my insurance company about the piano's value immediately," he said. "The standard procedure is to document all contact information related to the sale. Your brother's name will naturally be included." I nodded absently, still processing everything I had learned. It wasn't until later that evening that I realized the significance of this comment, and how it would bring the consequences of Travis's actions crashing down upon him. The call came at 8:15 the next morning as I was preparing for my meeting with Bennett and the lawyers. Travis's name flashed on my phone screen, and for a moment I considered ignoring it. But something told me this conversation needed to happen. "Pamela," his voice was breathless, panicked. "Some insurance guy just called me about the piano. He said it's worth over $3 million. That can't be right. Tell me that's not right." I took a deep breath. "It's right, Travis. The piano you sold for $500 is valued at approximately $3.7 million. It's a rare Steinway made for the Habsburg court in 1885, one of only 3 ever made." The silence on the other end lasted so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard what sounded like a choked sob. "Oh God, what have I done, Pam? We need to get it back. We can split it. I'm your brother. You can't cut me out of this." The audacity of his statement momentarily left me speechless. "Cut you out? You stole from me, Travis. You sold something that wasn't yours to sell. Something that was specifically left to me in grandmother's will." "I didn't know it was worth millions," he shouted. Desperation evident in his voice. "You never told me?" "I didn't know either," I replied calmly. "But even at $15,000, which is what we thought it was worth, you had no right to sell it. You saw it as just old wood, remember? Well, that old wood is now the subject of a legal dispute that you created." "What legal dispute?" "It's our piano from our family. We just need to tell that Bennett guy there was a mistake." "No, Travis. It's my piano from our family, and Bennett paid $75,000 for it, to Collins who paid you $500. This isn't a simple, oops, give it back situation." $75,000. His voice cracked. "That crook Collins resold it for $75,000. He told me $500 was a fair price. And you believed him without doing any research, without consulting me? without even considering what the piano meant to me beyond its monetary value. You just saw a quick solution to your gambling debts." Another silence then, his voice turned pleading. "Pam, I'm in trouble, real trouble. The guys I owe money to are threatening me. If they find out about this piano, please, we need to figure this out together. Whatever you get for it, just give me half and I'll never ask you for anything again." "I have a meeting with Bennett and our lawyers in 2 hours," I said. "I'll call you afterward. But Travis, understand this. I'm not promising you anything. You created this mess. You betrayed me in the worst possible way. I need time to think about what happens next." I hung up and tried to calm my racing thoughts. While the discovery of the piano's true value was shocking, it didn't change the fundamental betrayal. Travis had sold something precious that didn't belong to him. The fact that it turned out to be worth millions rather than thousands only magnified the consequences of his action, not the nature of it. The meeting with Bennett and the lawyers was tense but productive. Bennett, to his credit, seemed genuinely concerned with finding an ethical solution rather than simply protecting his purchase. If Miss Anderson can conclusively prove the piano was hers and was sold without her consent, I have no desire to keep stolen property, regardless of what I paid for it, he stated. However, I am out $75,000 and have incurred additional expenses for transportation and initial restoration assessment. My lawyer Maria Diaz, whom I had worked with on conservatory contracts in the past, laid out our position clearly. My client has the will specifying the piano was left to her family photographs, documenting its presence in her family for generations, and can provide witnesses who knew the piano belonged to her, not her brother. Additionally, Mr. Travis Anderson had no bill of sale or any documentation claiming ownership when he sold the instrument. Bennett's lawyer suggested a compromise. If proof of Miss Anderson's ownership is verified, Mr. Bennett would return the piano in exchange for reimbursement of his expenses, plus a reasonable fee for his expertise in identifying its true value. This seemed fair to me, though it would mean taking out a substantial loan. The alternative, lengthy legal proceedings, during which the piano might be held as evidence, was far less appealing. "There's another option," Bennett said unexpectedly. "I'm still very interested in this piano for my collection. Miss Anderson, would you consider a legitimate sale at full market value? Based on Dr. Faulkner's assessment, I'm prepared to offer $3.5 million. The number was staggering. With that kind of money, I could pay off my medical bills, buy a new performance-quality piano, establish a music scholarship, and still have millions left for investment and security. It was tempting. "I need time to consider all options," I replied. "But first we need to establish legal ownership conclusively." We agreed that I would gather additional evidence of my ownership, including testimony from family friends who knew about the inheritance, and any financial records showing I had paid for maintenance and tuning of the piano over the places. Years. As I was leaving the meeting, I received a text from an unknown number. "This is Lauren. Travis is spiraling. He came to my sister's house demanding money, said he's entitled to millions from some piano deal. What's going on?" I called her immediately and explained the situation as succinctly as possible. "I always knew that piano was special, but millions. That's incredible," Lauren said. "And typical Travis to focus only on the money, not on what he did wrong." "Has he been threatening you?" I asked, concerned. "Not physically, but he's desperate. Keeps saying these guys will break his legs if he doesn't pay them soon. I think he owes at least $50,000 in gambling debts." The amount was substantial but almost comically small compared to the piano's value. A piano he had sold for a fraction of his debt, solving nothing and creating a much bigger problem. I spent the next week gathering evidence of ownership. My piano tuner provided 5 years of service records showing I had paid for maintenance. 3 family friends signed affidavits confirming they knew the piano had been left specifically to me in my grandmother's will. Most conclusively, I found the original will in my safe deposit box, with the specific bequest clearly stated, to my granddaughter Pamela Anderson. I leave my Steinway grand piano, all associated sheet music, and the sum of $20,000. During this time, Travis made multiple attempts to contact me, alternating between pleading, threatening legal action of his own, and attempting to emotionally manipulate me with stories of the dangerous people he owed money to. I maintained minimal contact, informing him only that the legal process was underway to establish rightful ownership. Once the piano is legally confirmed as mine, I'll decide next steps, I told him during one brief call. But you're my sister, he argued. Half of everything in the family should be mine by right. The piano was specifically left to me, not to the family generally, I reminded him. Just like grandmother's car and investments were left specifically to you. Those were worth nothing compared to this. They were worth the same as far as anyone knew at the time, I countered. Your lack of responsibility with your inheritance doesn't entitle you to mine. The final confrontation came when Travis showed up at my apartment unannounced, clearly intoxicated and desperate. I know what you're doing, he slurred, pushing past me into the living room. You're cutting me out completely, after all I've done for you over the years. What exactly have you done for me, Travis? I asked quietly, maintaining distance between us. Besides selling my piano without permission, I've been there for you, when Mom and Dad died, who handled all the funeral arrangements, who dealt with the house when you were too busy with your precious music career. This revisionist history was too much. I paid for half the funeral expenses and did most of the estate paperwork. I've covered your portion of the property taxes multiple times when you claimed to be broke. And I've loaned you money repeatedly that you've never repaid. That's all just money, he dismissed with a wave. I'm talking about being there emotionally. The conversation was going nowhere, and Travis's agitation was increasing when he began rummaging through my desk drawers, presumably looking for documentation about the piano. I'd had enough. You need to leave now, or I'm calling the police, I said firmly. He whirled around, his expression ugly. You wouldn't call the cops on your own brother. You sold my most precious possession without permission. I absolutely would call the police if you refused to leave my home. Something in my tone must have convinced him I was serious. He left, but not without a parting shot. This isn't over. That piano is family property. I'll get what's mine. The next day, I received a call from Bennett. Miss Anderson, there's been a development you should know about. Someone attempted to break into my warehouse last night. Security footage shows a man matching your brother's description trying to access the restoration room where the Steinway is being kept. My blood ran cold. Was anything damaged? No, security intercepted him before he got past the main entrance. They didn't detain him, unfortunately. Company policy is to escort trespassers off the property unless there's actual break and damage. But I've filed a police report and increased security. This reckless act solidified my decision. Travis had moved beyond betrayal to potentially criminal behavior. His addiction had completely overtaken his judgment. 2 days later, we had our first court hearing, an emergency injunction to prevent any further sale or movement of the piano until ownership could be conclusively determined. Travis appeared with a hastily hired lawyer who argued that as co-owners of our parents' house, where the piano had been kept, Travis had partial claim to its contents. The judge was unimpressed. The will submitted by Miss Anderson clearly indicates the piano was her sole property. The fact that it was temporarily stored in a co-owned property does not transfer ownership rights. Travis's lawyer attempted another angle. Your Honor, regardless of the bequest, family heirlooms of extraordinary value should be considered joint property for the benefit of all direct descendants. That's not how inheritance law works, the judge replied dryly. If the deceased specifically allocated assets, those designations are legally binding absent evidence of coercion or incompetence. The judge granted the temporary injunction, prohibiting any sale or relocation of the piano, pending final determination of ownership. However, he added an important qualification. Given the significant value of the instrument in question, I'm ordering a professional authentication of its provenance and value to be conducted at a secure location with representatives of Tume, all parties present. As we left the courtroom, Travis approached me, his lawyer, attempting unsuccessfully to hold him back. This isn't fair, and you know it, he hissed. Grandmother would have wanted us to share anything this valuable. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw a stranger, consumed by greed and addiction, unrecognizable as the boy I had grown up with. No Travis. Grandmother knew exactly what she was doing. She left the piano to the person who valued it for more than its price tag, who saw it as our family's legacy, not as a quick source of cash. As I walked away, I heard him call after me, "You'll regret this. Pam family should come first." The irony of his statement was painful. In his mind, family comes first meant I should give him what he wanted, not that he should have respected what was precious to me in the first place. What Travis didn't know as he made his threats was that I had already begun formulating a plan, one that would protect my inheritance while potentially offering him a path to recovery if he was willing to take it. But first the court had to confirm what I already knew: the piano was legally and rightfully mine. The authentication process took place 3 weeks later at Bennett's climate-controlled warehouse under the supervision of a court-appointed expert, as well as Dr. Faulkner. Representatives for Travis Bennett and myself observed as they meticulously examined every aspect of the Steinway, from its unique serial number, to the quality of craftsmanship, to the barely visible Habsburg eagle stamped inside the cling case. The result was even more remarkable than the preliminary assessment. Not only was the piano confirmed to be one of 3 special commissions for Archduke Rudolph in 1885, but documentation discovered in European archives confirmed it had been gifted to composer Anton Bruckner, who had been a court musician and teacher. This historical connection further elevated its value. Based on recent auction results, for instruments of similar historical significance, and considering the documented royal provenance, the current market value is between $3.8 and $4.2 million. The court expert concluded. Travis, who had maintained a sullen silence throughout most of the examination, couldn't contain himself at this pronouncement. $4 million, he muttered, loud enough for me to hear. Half of that would solve all my problems. But the valuation was just one aspect of the court's determination. The next day, we returned to court for the final ruling on ownership. The judge was unequivocal. Based on the documentation provided, including the properly executed will of Eleanor Anderson family photographs, maintenance records, and witness affidavits, this court finds that the Steinway grand piano in question is the sole property of Pamela Anderson. Her brother Travis Anderson had no legal right to sell the instrument, and the sale is therefore null and void. He continued, Mr. Bennett, as an innocent purchaser who acted in good faith, is entitled to full reimbursement of the $75,000 he paid, plus reasonable expenses for transportation and security. Miss Anderson, as the rightful owner, may either provide this reimbursement and reclaim the piano, or negotiate a new valid sale with Mr. Bennett, if she so chooses. Travis stood up, his face flushed with anger. This is outrageous. That piano was in our family home. Mr. Anderson, the judge said sternly, your presence in this courtroom is a courtesy. You are not a plaintiff or defendant in this case, merely a witness. Please control yourself, or you will be removed. Travis stormed out, his lawyer hurrying after him. I felt a complex mixture of emotions, relief at the validation of my ownership, sadness at the final fracturing of our relationship, and uncertainty about what to do next. As I was leaving the courthouse, I received a call from Lauren Travis's wife. Pamela, I know we haven't been close lately, but I need to talk to you about Travis. He's hit rock bottom. After the court ruling, he went on a binge and lost another $10,000 gambling. He's talking about disappearing, saying he has nothing left to lose. Despite everything, I felt a pang of concern. Travis was still my brother, and addiction was a disease, not simply a moral failing. Where is he now? I asked. At a motel. He won't come home. His business is completely bankrupt. It has been for months. He's been living on loans and whatever he could get from selling things, including your piano. I took a deep breath. Lauren, I may have an idea, but I need to finalize some things first. Can you make sure he doesn't do anything reckless for the next 48 hours? I'll try. What are you thinking? Something that might help him, but only if he's willing to help himself first. My next call was to Edward Bennett. After the court ruling the ball was in my court regarding the piano's future, I could take out a loan to reimburse him and reclaim it, or I could negotiate a legitimate sale. "Mr. Bennett, I've made a decision about the Steinway," I said when he answered. "I hoped you'd call," he replied. "Whatever you decide, I want you to know, I respect the court's ruling completely. I'd like to discuss a third option, beyond simply reclaiming it or selling it outright." We arranged to meet that afternoon at his office. When I laid out my proposal, his eyes lit up with interest. "That's an unusual arrangement, but one I find quite appealing," he said when I had finished explaining. "Let me consult with my lawyer to make sure we structure it properly, but in principle, yes, I think we can make this work." With Bennett on board, I had one more difficult conversation ahead, with Travis. I asked Lauren to arrange a meeting at a neutral location, a quiet cafe near the conservatory where I taught. Travis arrived looking haggard with several days' stubble and dark circles under his eyes. He slid into the booth across from me with a defiant expression that couldn't quite mask his desperation. "Come to gloat?" he asked bitterly. "No. I came to offer you a chance to make things right. Not just with me, but with yourself." He scoffed. "Unless you're offering me $2 million, I don't see how anything can be right again." "I'm not giving you money directly," I said firmly. "That would just enable your addiction. But I am offering you a chance at a fresh start, if you're willing to do the work." His eyes narrowed suspiciously. "What kind of work?" "First, professional treatment for your gambling addiction. A 90-day inpatient program at Riverside Recovery Center. It's one of the best in the country." "I can't afford that," he dismissed. "I know. I'll cover the cost. But that's just the beginning. After you complete the program, successfully complete it, I emphasized, I'll help you restart your business legitimately. No loans, but I'll set up a proper business structure with accountability measures." He was silent for a long moment. "Why would you do that after what I did?" "Because despite everything, you're still my brother. And I believe that beneath the addiction and the lies, there's still the Travis I grew up with. The one who taught me to ride a bike and defended me from bullies in middle school." His eyes filled with tears, the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him in years. "I don't deserve your help." "No, you don't," I agreed. "But I'm offering it anyway, with conditions." "What conditions?" "Complete transparency about your finances going forward. Regular NA meetings. A formal apology to Lauren for what you've put her through. And you need to make things right with the people you owe money to. Legitimately through structured payment plans, not more gambling trying to win big." He looked down at his coffee. "And the piano? What are you doing with it?" "I've arranged a special agreement with Bennett. He'll purchase it for $3.8 million, but with unique terms. The piano will be featured in his private museum, with proper attribution to our family's history with it. I'll retain visitation rights and the ability to play it occasionally for special recordings or performances." I didn't mention the other key aspect of the arrangement, that a portion of the proceeds would be held in trust specifically for Travis's recovery and business restart, accessible only after he met certain milestones. He didn't need to know that detail yet. "So you're selling it after all," he said, a hint of the old bitterness returning. "I'm ensuring its legacy continues in a way that honors grandmother's memory, while also securing my future and offering you a chance to rebuild yours. The piano was never just about money, Travis. It was about our family's story. And that story isn't over yet." He was quiet for a long time, turning his coffee cup in circles on the table. Finally, he looked up. "When does this rehab program start?" he asked quietly. It wasn't an enthusiastic commitment, but it was a start. "They have an opening next Monday. I've already spoken with them." "And if I refuse? If I just walk away?" "Then you walk away. I'll still sell the piano, I'll still move forward with my life, and I'll hope that someday you find your way to recovery without my help. But this offer has an expiration date, Travis. I need your decision by tomorrow." I left the cafe uncertain whether he would accept my offer or let pride and addiction continue driving his decisions. The next 24 hours were tense, but at precisely 9 o'clock, The next morning I received a text. "I'll do it. Not for the money or the business, but because I'm tired of being this person. I'm sorry, Pam. For everything." It wasn't a magical transformation. I knew recovery would be difficult with potential relapses and ongoing challenges, but it was the first step on a long road back, for Travis, and for our relationship. That afternoon, I met with Bennett to finalize our agreement. The piano would be sold for $3.8 million, with special provisions for my continued connection to it. The paperwork was signed, the transfer arranged, and a new chapter in the Steinway's long history began. As we completed the transaction, Bennett made an unexpected offer. "I'd like to host a special concert once the restoration is complete," he said. "You performing on your grandmother's piano in its full glory. Would you consider it?" I looked at the magnificent instrument that had been part of my life for as long as I could remember, the piano that had nearly torn my family apart, but was now creating new possibilities for healing and growth. "Yes," I said. "I think grandmother would like that very much." 1 year later, I stood backstage at the Bennett Museum of Musical History, my performance dress shimmering under the lights, my right hand finally healed and stronger than ever. Through the curtain, I could see 200 guests, seated in the intimate concert hall program, notes in hand, waiting for the evening's special performance, Habsburg Harmonies, the Bruckner Steinway returns to life. In the front row sat Edward Bennett, beaming with pride at the culmination of a year's worth of meticulous restoration work on the Steinway. Beside him was Dr. Faulkner, who had overseen every detail of the piano's return to its original glory, and 3 seats from the end, looking uncomfortable, in a suit but undeniably present, was Travis. The 90-day rehabilitation program had extended to 6 months at his own request. The road to recovery had not been smooth. There had been one significant relapse at the 4-month mark, a terrifying week when he disappeared, and went on a gambling binge that nearly cost him everything again. But he had returned voluntarily recommitted to the program, and had now been sober for 6 straight months. I had kept my promise. A portion of the piano's sale, approximately $300,000, had been placed in a trust managed by a financial advisor, with funds released gradually as Travis met specific milestones in his recovery and business rebuilding. It wasn't the half he had initially demanded, but it was substantial support tied to accountability. More importantly, our relationship was slowly mending. Trust would take years to rebuild completely, if ever. But we were talking again, having weekly dinners, finding our way back to being family. The museum director signaled 5 minutes until showtime. I took a deep breath, centering myself as I had before countless performances. But this one was different. This was about coming full circle, about honoring the past while embracing the future. The restoration of the piano had revealed even more about its remarkable history. During the careful disassembly and cleaning, conservators discovered a small compartment beneath the keyboard containing a faded letter from Anton Bruckner himself, thanking the Archduke for the magnificent gift and promising to compose a special piece for it. The letter added yet another layer of historical significance to the instrument, further validating Bennett's investment and my family's unknowing stewardship of a musical treasure. I had used a portion of the proceeds to establish the Eleanor Anderson Music Scholarship at the conservatory, where I taught, providing tuition assistance to talented students from financially disadvantaged backgrounds. The first 3 recipients were already showing tremendous promise, continuing the legacy of music that my grandmother had valued so deeply. For myself, I had purchased a beautiful new Steinway for my home, not as historically significant as my grandmother's, but an excellent instrument that allowed me to continue teaching and performing. The remainder of the money was wisely invested, providing financial security I had never imagined possible. The director nodded. It was time. I walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause, taking a moment to acknowledge the audience before settling onto the bench of the restored Steinway. Its gleaming surface caught the stage. Lights, the intricate Habsburg eagle inlay now visible on the fallboard, after careful restoration had revealed details long obscured by age and wear. My fingers touched the keys, the same keys my grandmother had played, the same keys that had possibly felt Bruckner's touch over a century ago. the piano responded with a warmth and resonance that brought tears to my eyes. I began with Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, grandmother's favorite piece, letting the music fill the space between past and present. As I played through the carefully selected program, I caught glimpses of Travis in the audience. During a particularly emotional passage of Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata, I saw him wipe away tears. He had told me during one of our recent dinners that he finally understood what the piano had meant to me, not as a possession or an investment, but as a connection to our shared history, to the grandmother who had shaped both our lives in different ways. I was so focused on what it could buy that I never thought about what it actually was, he had admitted. I never really listened when you played. I'm sorry for that too. After the concert at the reception in the museum's grand atrium, Travis approached me cautiously, 2 glasses of sparkling cider in hand. That was beautiful, he said, offering me one of the glasses. Grandmother would have been proud. I accepted the drink with a nod. Thank you for coming. I know this isn't exactly your scene. I wouldn't have missed it. Besides, Lauren would have killed me if I skipped it. He gestured toward his wife, who was chatting animatedly with Bennett about the other instruments in his collection. Their relationship had been through its own healing process, parallel to, but separate from our sibling reconciliation. How's the business going? I asked. Travis had restarted his construction company, focusing on smaller residential renovations rather than the larger commercial projects he'd unsuccessfully chased before. Steady. Not glamorous, but honest work with reliable clients. We just hired a second full-time carpenter last month. There was genuine pride in his voice, untainted by the desperate bravado of his gambling days. That's wonderful, Travis. We stood in awkward but not uncomfortable silence for a moment, both aware of how far we had come and how far we still had to go. You know what I think about sometimes, he said finally. If I had just asked you about selling the piano instead of going behind your back, if I had been honest about my gambling debts instead of lying to everyone, how differently everything might have turned out. We can't change the past, I replied, but we can learn from it. I have learned, the hard way. He hesitated, then added, I still can't believe I sold a $4 million piano for $500. Probably the worst business decision in history. We both laughed, the tension easing. The fact that we could now find humor in what had been so painful was perhaps the clearest sign of healing. Later that evening, after the guests had departed and the museum staff were preparing to close, Bennett invited me to spend a few more moments alone with the piano. I sat in the empty concert hall, running my fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. What happens now? I asked Bennett, who stood respectfully at a distance. The piano becomes the centerpiece of our historical collection, he replied, but as we agreed, you'll have access whenever you wish to play it or record with it. And next month we begin the educational program you suggested, bringing in students to learn about its history and craftsmanship. I nodded, satisfied. The piano would not be locked away as a mere display piece, but would continue to serve its purpose, to create music and inspire future generations. As I finally stood to leave, Bennett added, Your grandmother preserved this treasure without even knowing its full value. She passed it to the right person in you, Miss Anderson, and you found a way to honor its past while securing its future. That's a remarkable legacy. His words stayed with me as I drove home that night. The piano had nearly torn my family apart, but in a strange way, it had also created a path toward healing. Travis was facing his addiction and rebuilding his life with a humility and determination I had never seen in him before. I had financial security that allowed me to focus on teaching and performing without constant worry. And our family's unexpected connection to musical history would live on in Bennett's museum. The most valuable lesson wasn't about the piano's monetary worth, but about the importance of standing firm in protecting what matters most to you, while still finding room for compassion and second chances. Grandmother had known the piano was special and had protected it accordingly. I had followed her example, refusing to let Travis's reckless act permanently separate me from my inheritance. Yet the silence I had maintained after discovering the piano's true value, not immediately confronting Travis with what he had done, but instead working methodically through legal channels to secure what was rightfully mine, had given me the time and space to consider a resolution that could benefit us both. Silence had cost Travis his chance to profit unfairly from his betrayal, but it had ultimately provided an opportunity for genuine redemption. As I pulled into my driveway, I thought about the next day's schedule. My first student would be arriving at 10, a 12-year-old girl with extraordinary talent and limited means now supported by the Eleanor Anderson Scholarship. We would be working on Chopin's Prelude in E minor, the same piece grandmother had first taught me when my feet couldn't yet reach the pedals. The circle was complete. The music continued, and the lessons learned through loss and recovery would resonate far beyond the magnificent Steinway that had changed our lives forever. What precious family heirloom do you have that connects you to your past? Or what possession means the most to you beyond its monetary value? Share your stories in the comments below, and if this tale of betrayal, discovery, and reconciliation really touched you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of family challenges overcome. Remember, sometimes the things we value most aren't just about what they're worth, but about who we become through protecting and honoring them. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you always treasure the truly priceless connections in your own life.